You know, when you look at this fight on paper between Touma and Accelerator, it shouldn't be as close as you think it will be. Especially when you see that Accelerator is the number one Esper in his city and Touma isn't even ranked. But when you see the fight itself, you know exactly how Touma was able to pull it off. Now, we're going to talk about this fight. Let's talk about what led to this fight in the first place. You see, in Magical Index, there are 7 level 5 Espers with only 6 ever being shown. And to say they stand out from the rest is an understatement, given their power gap between the rest of the Espers. Believe it or not, there is a wide power gap between the level 5 Espers themselves. So knowing they was this powerful, a group of researchers used a supercomputer called the Tree Diagram to come up with a crazy idea known as the Level 6 Shift Project. The idea was that Accelerator would kill 20,000 clones of a different level Esper, being Misaka, in order to push the Accelerator level to level 6 to achieve godlike powers. Now, the researchers did this project with something else in mind, but to Accelerator knowledge, it was just an experiment to make them stronger. So Accelerator started to slaughter clones. Now, it wasn't until Accelerator had already killed over 10,000 clones that he was confronted by the actual Misaka that the clones were based off of. Now, it's important to note that the clones weren't as strong as the real Misaka. But to Accelerator, the fact that this was the real Misaka made no difference. The screen between the two was so wide that you wouldn't believe that Misaka is actually the third strongest Esper. Saying it was a one-sided fight wouldn't be right, because Misaka couldn't even leave dust on Accelerator's shoes. Speaking of which, now would be a good time to talk about what Accelerator's ability actually is. You see, Accelerator is able to control any and all vectors. This allows them to control anything with magnitude and direction and change it. This gives them incredible defense and offense, especially since its ability gives them a passive shield that reflects all forces, that being physical or environmental. Not even things on the atomic level can get through. Fun fact, that's why Accelerator has white hair and pale skin. His passive shield blocks ultraviolet rays too, so getting past his shield is almost impossible. Then his use of it in an offensive way is just as insane. Since he controls vectors, anything around him essentially becomes a weapon, even himself. He can even throw a pebble, and because of the vectors, it would be no different than a speeding bullet. So when Misaka's best attack does nothing, it's not that surprising that she starts losing hope. The only reason Accelerator chooses not to kill Misaka is because the clones tell Accelerator that if he does that, it will result in a planned failure. Now, feeling hopeless, Misaka ends up running into the main character, Touma Kamijo. This isn't a coincidence though on Kamijo's part. After meeting the clone himself, Kamijo decided to look more into what was going on, and ended up finding out about the Level 6 project. This is where Kamijo tells her that he's worried about her and she needs to stop. Since it's obvious she can't be Accelerator, there's no point of her confronting him again. This obviously pissed Misaka off, because if she doesn't do anything, more clones will just continue to die. So she tells Kamijo to move out the way or prepare to fight, but Kamijo refuses to move or fight. This is when Misaka attacks Kamijo and sees he refuses to use his ability and just decides to take the attack head on. This made Misaka confused on why he just didn't stop it. Kamijo continues to try to convince her that her way isn't going to save anyone and she'll just die a pointless death. With Misaka not wavering with Kamijo's words in her mind, she attacks him again, knocking him out this time. With Kamijo's refusal to fight, Misaka understood how far he was willing to go for her. When Kamijo wakes up, he's in the lap of Misaka. She tells Kamijo that his heart could have stopped, but Kamijo was fully willing to take the risk. With that, Kamijo asks Misaka to tell him the location of Accelerator, because he has a plan. You see, Kamijo's idea was that if Accelerator were to lose against someone like him, then researchers would have to rethink the Level 6 project. Because if Accelerator lost to someone who was a level 0 like Kamijo, then there was no way Accelerator could reach godlike strength. By the way, in Magical Index, if you're a level 0, you're basically a normal person with no abilities. Now, if you're wondering why Kamijo was a level 0 despite having the ability, it's because almost no one knew he had one in the first place because of his nature. You see, Kamijo's ability is called Imagine Breaker. This ability completely negates any and all powers or phenomenons. The thing is though, it's only in his right hand, meaning his right hand has to make contact to stop the ability. And to the average person who has no powers like Kamijo, Kamijo is just an average guy. Now, while Accelerator is in the middle of fighting a clone, Kamijo interferes and stops the fight, forcing the fight between the two instead. Now, when the fight between the two happens, Accelerator quickly grabs the upper hand against Kamijo, messing with the vectors all surrounding objects. Kamijo couldn't do anything, but try to keep his distance. By the way, Accelerator isn't just powerful, but he's also extremely smart, so Kamijo couldn't afford to be reckless. After causing a small explosion, Accelerator starts to get a little arrogant and rushes Kamijo. giving him the perfect opportunity to nail Accelerator in the face. Not only that, but landing multiple solid hits forcing Accelerator to fall back and collect his thoughts. Mind you, Accelerator is confused because up to this point, Accelerator has never lost a fight, let alone been hit before because of his passive barrier. So this makes Accelerator start to lose his composure even more and act more reckless, leading him to get beat on some more by Kamijo. Before Kamijo can land another hit though, Accelerator starts to tweak out. Then he finally lands a hit back on Kamijo. This is when the actual Masaka showed up, but Accelerator couldn't care less. You see, Accelerator started messing with the vectors in the wind, and that's what he hit Kamijo with. Not only that, but Accelerator perfectly calculated the movements of the wind in order to compress the wind. Remember, Accelerator is extremely smart because he didn't condense the wind in order to create plasma. Now you may be thinking this isn't that big of a deal since Kamijo could just negate the plasma, but the thing is he can't. Remember, Kamijo can only negate abilities. If Kamijo tried to stop this with his hand, his whole arm would get blown off. Luckily, since Accelerator was paying Misaka no mind, she was able to come up with an idea with the clone Accelerator was fighting earlier. That being getting Misaki and all the clones to use their electromagnetism to mess with all the propeller fans. This causing a disruption in the wind that Accelerator was using, throwing off his calculations and not letting him use plasma. Not only that, but this gave Kamijo a chance to recover. Accelerator then rushes Kamijo in order to mess with the vectors in his body, but Kamijo is ready and lays Accelerator out, claiming victory. Later, Kamijo finds out from a clone that his plan actually works. With the defeat of Accelerator, the project was cancelled. Now, that's basically how the fight between these two went, and surprisingly enough, this was one of their few encounters, but not their last fight. Funny enough, Esper is one of my favorite characters, and he isn't a one-off character at all. He actually has his own series. So if you want to know more about Accelerator, comment about him, because this was definitely a fight